Greetings. Welcome to Powered by Nyame. I'm your guide and host, Kwesi Kunadu. Welcome to another episode. This week's episode will focus on habits or principles for healthy relationships. In this episode, I will share with you several of them that have been very successful, not only in my life, but certainly in the life of others that have used them. Now, before we get into those principles or habits, I want to first lay out what I mean by a principle, because principles, in my view at least, are quite different than rules. Rules are usually hard and fast, almost absolute things you must do that have certain consequences if you don't do them. And that is punishments or other kinds of consequences. Principles, however, are more like guiding marks or floating parameters that you don't have to beat yourself up if you don't do it one day, one night, one week. But the idea is to strive to do so as guiding marks. And so the focus here is on principles, not rules, by which to create some form of punishment if you don't abide by them. So let's begin with the first principle. The first principle of a healthy relationship is this. It is that one should always make sure that you as a partner or one or both of you, if both of you are watching this, that forms a union, that forms a couple, married or not, that forms a union, that forms a couple, because there are different kinds of marriages. There's marriage on paper, that is the legal sort of scribal form, and there's marriage in the heart. Now, either one or either form of union, you always want to make sure as a guiding principle that you and your partner, you and your spouse, you and the person whom shares or plans to share life together, do not go to bed angry or upset with each other. Here's why. You see, malice and going to bed with malice between the two of you, one toward the other, can lead to this. We can die in our sleep. Yes, it is possible, because our spirit leaves our body and things can happen to our spirit. A spirit can actually be killed. And so the body won't wake up, right? Because it doesn't have a source of energy or a battery to activate it and therefore make it alive. And so what you have is a corpse. And so because there is the very real possibility of dying in our sleep, and of course we don't control that, if that were to happen with malice in our heart toward our partner, toward our spouse, then the graver consequence is not simply dying. The graver consequence is that we lose our soul. We become a condemned soul, a condemned spirit that can never go home to the village, that will never make it back to the point or the space from which it came. It will be condemned. It will join the other condemned souls. Some people call them evil spirits, some people call them demons, whatever you want to call them, they're condemned souls. And they are restless, they're essentially homeless, and they cannot go home. So, that is the far-reaching and most important and gravest consequence of having malice. And so as a practice, what my wife and I try to do is make sure that whatever tension or whatever issue, whatever concern, whatever is in our head, it means that it's going to infect and bleed into our heart, that is our soul. And so once it bleeds into there, it's going to have a great effect on us. So it's best to spill or release whatever those issues, tensions, concerns may be with your partner, with your loved one, before head hits pillow, before one of you or both of you decide to go to bed that night. Because once you go to bed and once your spirit leaves the body and you enter this dream state, any and everything is possible. And if one were to pass away in that dream state, then not just dying is the worst thing. It's not. It's the soul being condemned and losing your soul, right? So make it a habit to do so if you don't do so. I know people that have dragged on for days and weeks, even months, malice towards their partner, and go to their bed heavy-hearted, right? Tormented by the torment they've created by not resolving the malice between their and their partner. And that leads to chaos, leads to other kinds of havoc within your life, within the union, and certainly within the family if the couple has one. So that's the first principle. The second principle is this: never, as a person in a relationship, never allow your partner to sweep rubbish, that is, whatever is on the floor, whatever is in the area in which is being swept, sweep you, that is, sweep the debris onto you, or sweep your feet. Here's why you don't want that to happen. If your feet is swept or debris is swept onto your feet, it means that you will never stay in that home, in that place you may call a home. It means that you will always want to what? Stay away and roam and be outside of that home. Essentially, we are ejecting and even rejecting the partner where they will never stay still or land a foot inside that home. And so this goes for both partners, is to never sweep the feet or debris while sweeping onto the partner. Now, of course, there are rituals in which to deal with that, but you want to avoid that because prevention is better than cure. So before we get to the ritual stage, as a principle, ensure that whenever we're cleaning, especially sweeping, which is the most common form of cleaning in a home, in a household, make sure we never sweep debris onto the feet or sweep the feet of that person or even their shoes, right? Because that means we're simply saying that to them, that ritually and spiritually, we are what? Casting them out of the household, right? And it may not be intentional. So make sure as a guiding principle, we never sweep the feet of our partner. The third principle is this. The third principle is that for the man in the relationship, who's a real man, presumably, he has a role or roles to be the protector, to be the one of the providers, but also the defender of the marriage, of the household, not solely, but certainly most importantly, right? And then in those roles, right, he has to have a wife or a spouse who is the one doing the work behind him. I don't mean she's less than, I want to be very clear, but behind him in this way, that she's the one who is what? Engaged in prayer in whatever form in which you may pray. But she's the one who's essentially what? Ensuring his protection while he is protecting the rest. And so it's a complement whereby if he is doing his job, his duties as protector, right? As the other provider, as the one to ensure that the house and the home is defended from any and all human or otherwise figures and forces, then the wife and the female partner in that relationship, her duty is to make sure that she is behind, not literally behind him, but she is doing her part by engaging in those acts of ritual prayer to ensure that the creative force and God and all the spirits of the world, the productive ones, are backing him, supporting him, and defending him while he's defending the homestead and the people in it. It's very important because the power thereof will come through her, right? And so she has a very important role, just like he has a very important role. And this balancing act between the two is the third principle that ensures a healthy and wholesome relationship. That is, we have our roles, we have our stations, we have our particular parts that we play, right? And it's a balancing act in terms of the parts we play. Thus, it's not really a competition, nor should it be, nor is it one that one has a higher or lower role. It's neither of that. It's simply just a particular roles in which male and female play in male-female relationships. The fourth principle is this. The fourth principle is that whenever people in a relationship, particularly those that have children, whenever they have an issue or a challenge or a problem, let it be solely among the adults. That is, the issue or problem should not bleed or leak into the lives of the children. The children should not be used as pawns or as weapons against the other parent or against the other individual within the union. And even if you don't have children, do not use other people's children to do so, because there's a ways in which the things that we do to other people's children and our own will have a net negative effect, not only on them, but their children and their children's children. There's a way in which our particular transgression, our particular misdeeds has a way of leapfrogging us. We might think, hey, I'm all good, I'm unscathed, nothing happened to me. And while we are beating our chests and singing our own praise poetry about nothing happened to me, well, that may be true on the surface, but beyond the surface, what's happening is that these things usually leak into the next generation and their generations to come. And it's not nice or pretty what would happen to them. So ensure that whatever issue concern stays among the adults within the adult circle and is resolved sooner and not later. And never should children be used as weapons, as pawns to essentially fight out or duel with the other party, whatever issues that you may have with that party. The fifth principle that I want to share with you is this principle. The fifth principle is this. If you plan as a couple to have children, right? It is deeply important, and it's about roles again, deeply important as a principle that the mother-to-be, whether it's a first-time mother, second-time mother, doesn't really matter, but there's a mother. I want to back up for a moment and distinguish a mother from a carrier. You see, many women, most women, I would say, have the capacity to bear children. There are some women who cannot bear children for biological and other reasons, so I put them to the side. But those that have the capacity to bear children, that is, to carry a child full term, there's a difference between two kinds of those potential mothers. One is a carrier. A carrier is simply one that carries a child to full term. They're not really a mother. That is, they don't have the sincere and real love from their mother and their mother's mother, and therefore they don't know what to look for and how to give it. As Earth, Wind, and Fire said in one of their songs, if you can't give what you don't have, right? And as such, these carriers essentially prolong or transmit their lack of real and genuine mother's love because they didn't get it from their mother and they couldn't get it from their mother and neither from their grandmother or the entire generations that produced her. And so they remain carriers. A real mother, obviously, can give and dispense mother's love. And so a mother, right, is one who has a particular kind of life to them. And that life is about their children. Let me tell you the difference by way of example, and I'll get to very quickly the principle regarding expecting mothers in a relationship. So a carrier will often see the forthcoming or expecting child in competition with them, with the man they're with. In other words, and I've seen this in several relationships, actually many relationships, where the first, second-time mother sees that the child will get more attention than the person who has brought that child full term, right? And it becomes sort of a bidding war. It becomes sometimes internally, sometimes externally, very nasty between the attention the child's getting and the one that the woman feels she's not getting as the carrier. That's a sign of a carrier. The other sign of the carrier is that the person doesn't really care, right? And she can't care and can't love the children. This person tends to bark out orders and commands. The person is very manipulative. They use tears. They use all kinds of means and methods to manipulate the children to think or allow the children to believe that care is love, but care is not love, right? It's like thinking that a block of Jell-O is actually a concrete brick. Yes, they're both blocks, but they're two different kinds of blocks, right? So care is not love, right? And that's the sign of a carrier, right? They can't. It's impossible for them to give love, and so they pretend, through these acts of manipulative care, right? Of almost, scripted care, right? And in their moments where they're caught off guard, they often will chase or lash out at the children. These are signs of a carrier. A real mother is the opposite of that. So for those expecting mothers, the male's role is essentially to ensure she is treated like a queen. Now, it doesn't mean that she can't do any wrong, but if she does, we have to temper it. We can't respond to her with a hammer, but with a feather. By that I mean that how she's treated in the course of those average 9 months will determine the kind of mother she will be for your children, right? And in many ways, that treatment is an investment, right? And that investment will have a dividend or return in terms of the mother that she will become once the child is born, if she's not already a mother, right? And if she's already a mother, it will be maximized. It will be doubled, sometimes tripled, depending on how many children are already there, right? So for expecting mothers, it's most important that the male, the father, the husband, if that be the case, treats and regards and respects the woman as a queen in the sense of ensuring that stress it as a minimum, tensions and issues at a minimum. If they arise, squash them, deal with them effectively and immediately, right? Malice, deal with those, right? Because the dividends will be maximized, not simply in the child or children, because a woman can have more than one child at the same time, but also in their children, because those children will inherit, will be essentially saturated by that mother's love, right? Because that mother will not be distracted with the issues and concerns that is essentially terrifying her mind, stressing her out, as it were. And we know that women can miscarry based on stress alone. So ensure that the woman has a queen-like atmosphere, a queen-like regard and respect, especially during those critical months. So it's not simply for her and the child, but the generations to come, because they will right? They will come out of that saturated environment, and they will be imbibed by that. The sixth principle of a healthy relationship is this. It's not simply communication. And we hear that often, that communication is important. Yes, it's important. But this is what's most critical. And I keep it very short and simple. Many of us will share, particularly men, they'll share the highs, right? The joys. They'll share the things that we think is positive. But they won't share their pain. They won't share their things that are troubling them, what's tormenting them. They won't share their, the things that are racking their brains, things that they're going through. So how is it's okay to share things that are, when things are good and things are great, but it's not important to share when things are not? Men and women, we have to share everything. Because if you love someone, you don't hold things in your head and you hold things in your heart. You have to share it. And in sharing it, you ensure that that person can be that support, can be that mattress that not only you can rest on when rest is needed, but also is what the springboard offer of to get your bounce back. If the matter, is one that is draining, the one that is painful. And so critically important. The seventh and final principle is this. If all principles fail, and they won't, but if all principles fail, you think they fail, and you fall back on what? You fall back on LOVE, right? Not the emotional love, but the thing that will make you miss that person when they leave the room, when you go into that Uber or that cab to the airport, when you're away, let's say at work, and that person is at home or another work, and you just can't stop thinking about them, their well-being, when you feel their pain, when you feel their torment, when you feel their hunger, literally and metaphorically, right? You always fall back to the foundation, always fall back to the bedrock. And those moments that you fall back on will get you back into the first six principles, right? So, for Powered by Nyame, I've been your guide and host as usual. Drop your comments, questions in the section below. Until next time, stay well.